Mr. Hahn, Mr. Bigham, fellow board members, I'd like to call to order the Bloom Carroll Board of Education planning session held in the cafeteria on July 29th, 2020 at 6 p.m. Mr. Bigham, roll call, please.
Mr. Abbott? Present. Mr. Bratton?
Present.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Present.
Mr. Rod Johnson?
Present.
Mr. Sherman?
All right, Steve, pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving on. D, consider approval of the agenda. I know it's a pretty short agenda tonight. Did anybody have any questions, concerns?
I do not.
Hearing none, may I get a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Mr. Abbott, second by Mr. Jimmy Johnson. Mr. Bigham?
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
And Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes. All right, moving on to our E planning session. Before we get, and everybody I'm sure here has a lot of questions and comments that they'll make this evening. If you would please, while Mr. Hahn and the board discusses our planning session here, we'll cover a couple topics here I'm sure everybody wants to hear about. Instead of sitting back here with your hand up, we have public participation that's available. You can sign up and speak if you'd like to. Those questions is, I don't want to be disrespectful by any means, but we'll be holding those and you have an opportunity to ask them when we get to public participation. Thank you. Mr. Hunt, number one, COVID-19 and restarting school, 2020-2021 planning session. The content items 1.1 through 1.A is presented.
Okay. Well, good evening and welcome. Board members, thanks for once again giving your time and dedication, service to the Bloom Carroll community. Being a school board member, honestly, is not supposed to be this difficult. And the last few months certainly has been with the pandemic and trying to find a way to educate children in the many different opinions that we've had to navigate in this process. Just know that I understand your job's not easy, but it's important to have good people, analytical people that obviously are working for the students and the staff and the parents and the entire community. So I think all of you have done a tremendous job dealing with this, and I'm sorry about the amount of time that it's taking up. I get paid a little bit for this. You guys really don't get too much, so I understand how it maybe has consumed your life. Just want to also let the many staff members and community members that have reached out to me with thoughts and opinions and understanding and kindness. I just want to say thank you to all those individuals that are out there that have reached out and understand that the dynamics of this situation is very difficult to navigate, and you can't make everybody happy with every decision. You always try to do what is best for students and keep everybody safe as possible in that process. So it certainly hasn't been easy, but I appreciate the board, I appreciate the community and where everybody's at right now. So some things tonight with this planning agenda. Obviously, this is sometimes a meeting that it's a quiet time of year before we really pick up, and sometimes these meetings are canceled. But late last week, the cage was rattled in Fairfield County, and there was a statement put out by Fairfield County Health Department and Health Commissioner Dr. Mark Abbey. And that guidance came out on the 23rd, and it was a medical recommendation. It was not a comprehensive approach at that time. It's strictly a medical recommendation. It was not an order or a mandate. And that guidance suggested that school districts must weigh the advice against the social and economic and educational consequences of not having in-person schooling. Obviously, about a week before that, we have met 4 or 5 times with the health department, and with this new Ohio Public Health advisory system, there are 4 levels throughout the state, and the Fairfield Department of Health had consistently communicated that there is no mandate tying any school district decision to the public health advisory system, but that when a county is in a level 3, the health department felt that schools should consider cohorting students into groups and potentially offering a blended combination of in-person learning with some remote or online learning, and cohorting students into groups to cut down on the amount of capacity on your school buses and in your school buildings. So when that letter came out, we were trying to make sense and really understand what it meant. It was the first county in the state out of 88 to kind of take that position. And very soon there was a group of physicians, over 50, including infectious disease experts that are medical professionals licensed that work in Fairfield County or surrounding areas and reside here. And they obviously got together and stated that a more comprehensive approach to the decision-making needed to take place, and that school leaders and parents should consider the full spectrum of benefits of both in-person learning and obviously the risk of potentially being out of school and what that means for children. They really felt like they really urged the compliance with the best tools available, including facial coverings, social distancing as much as possible, and hand washing. Within a couple days, the health department issued another statement. The date on that was on the 27th, and it was a revised statement to schools that guidelines from the Ohio Department of Health should be incorporated along with their guidelines for the Ohio Public Health Advisory System. And under each level, level 1, 2, and 3, and 4, they make recommendations about what should be followed. And they felt like those recommendations should be followed. They didn't say necessarily what kind of schooling should take place, but the guidelines under the Public Health Advisory System should be followed as much as possible. But the Department of Health went on to say that they strongly believe that we can reduce the viral transmission by wearing face coverings and hand washing, social distancing, staying home when ill, and observing guidelines at events. There are a lot of guidelines being issued, orders from the Department of Health. Even the Ohio High School Athletic Association is working on some things for very specific events that might involve sports, and that would include some guidelines that need to be developed for things like band as well. So when this letter came out, obviously it kind of made everybody, all the superintendents and school districts, try to make sense of it, and we needed to find out what it meant from an insurance standpoint, and whether it was a recommendation or a directive or an order. And there's a difference between a directive and an order in a recommendation. Schools are bound to follow directives and orders from the Ohio Department of Health and the local Fairfield Department of Health or their county Department of Health. So we needed to clarify what that meant, if that potentially, if we went another direction based upon their first guidance, and then they issued a revised statement, what that meant from a insurance standpoint with our coverage in general. So we had to work with legal counsel. We had to put a hold on some things with athletics to make sense of this. We have been doing some summer trainings, and which were permitted by the State Department of Health and the Fairfield Department of Health. But really, we just had to make sense and make sure that we were still operating in a way that provided coverage for the district. So Travis and I, the treasurer, worked with our legal counsel and our insurance company to get a better understanding of that. But at about the same time, the CDC went on to state the importance of reopening schools in the fall at some level. And they felt that, again, that we should consider the social, emotional, and behavioral health and economic well-being and the academic of children, both in the short term and long term, and the impacts on that. And they obviously point out, and we all know, that the lack of in-person instruction and educational options is very disproportionate and typically harms low-income and minority students and students with disabilities more that really need those opportunities. So there's not one way to look at this. And that's, from the CDC, the Ohio Department of Health, the Fairfield Department of Health, revising their statement to explain and clarify their position. It's been a crazy week trying to make sense of all this. But, they go on to point out some things, again, about schools, providing safety and nutrition, physical activity, obviously more so in some communities than others, but these are all things that the Bloom Carroll District does, and the emotional impact and the social skills that students learn from being in school are all very important and should be considered. Now, no decision is necessarily made tonight. We made a decision, the school board made a decision on July 13th. This meeting is really being done to clarify some things from last week, let you know where I stand at this time, hear input from the board, that we will continue to monitor the situation. But I wanted to explain that, what happened last week with the health department and the revised statement and the CDC and other entities, over 50 physicians, that was a collaborative message. We're bound to the health commissioner and the Fairfield Department of Health. We're not necessarily bound to private physicians that group together to state an opinion. It is valuable, but there's a difference when an insurance company says, well, are you following a group of private physicians, or are you following the directives and orders, or is it a recommendation from your health department? There's a difference between directives and orders and recommendations. So that's what kind of happened last week that we needed to clarify. Some things to point out, obviously, try to share some of this just so we kind of have an update on some things. But the CDC wanted to kind of put some things in perspective too. And according to the CDC, as of July 17th, the United States reported that children and adolescents under 18 years old account for 7% of COVID cases and less than 0.1% of COVID-related deaths. Although relatively rare, flu-related deaths in children occur every year. From 2004 to 2019, flu-related deaths in children reported to the CDC during regular flu season ranged from 37 to 187 deaths. During the H1N1 pandemic from 2009 to 2010, 358 pediatric deaths were reported to the CDC. So far in this pandemic, deaths of children are less than in each of the last 5 flu seasons, with 64 at that time. Again, you can find this on the CDC website, and then their opinion about things that we should be considering. If you look at the county at a local level, there are 457 cases, active cases in Fairfield County currently. You can find this information on the Fairfield Department of Health. 457 cases. According to the last census, there's about 157,000 people in Fairfield County. I would say there's probably upwards of over 160,000 now. And that amounts for 0.2% of the population that have active cases. 667 people have recovered so far from COVID in the county. Within the county area, you can look by zip code, and since March through the present, there have been 38 cases in the 43110 zip code. That is including beyond Bloom Township. That includes Canal Winchester, parts of Violet, Pickerington, even up into Madison in that area. In Greenfield Township, there have been 28 cases. In the Lithopolis area since March, in the Lithopolis zip code, there have been 22 cases. So that's where things currently stand today at the county level. The key metrics in terms of testing, a lot of health officials will look at the testing and positivity rate. You can see about a week ago that the state of Ohio was conducting around 27,000 tests per day. A few weeks before that, they were conducting a few weeks before that, they were conducting 10, 15,000 tests, somewhere in there. The positivity rate in the state is about 6.1% as of today. If you look at the mortality rate, about 52% of the mortalities are 80 and over, 25% are age 70 and over, 70 to 79, and then 14% are between 60 to 69. So that's what, 91% of the mortalities are age 60 and over. If you add the 50 and over age group, 50 to 59, that is 6%. That makes up about 97%. There have been 2 mortalities in the state of Ohio since March, since the pandemic began. So I kind of always like to look at these as well to try to keep things. This is state data. People can question it, how it's being done, but I think it's always important to constantly review that, listen to your health officials, weigh the guidance of professionals, health professionals in any decision. And I think that's what the board did a couple weeks ago in that decision process. So I don't know if there's any questions about some of those items, the letters, any discussion that you want to have. There are other things that I will want to talk about, including the restart plan and some updates that include discussion on mask and start dates, and looking at the remote learning plan in more detail to see what a schedule might look like if we had to go to a all remote learning environment at a building or throughout the district. And then we'll talk about staffing and athletics as well were some of the items that I wanted to discuss. So,
Mr. Hahn, just, I think to expand a little bit on the insurance and the legal discussion, because I know that, and rightfully so, that was a board concern, especially when the first letter was sent out from the Fairfield Department of Health. The first dialogue we had with legal and insurance was, again, based on that first letter, the recommendation that we were in a remote environment, not only from a coverage standpoint with the pandemic, but also an overall coverage standpoint. Would they drop all coverages, property, fleet, liability, if we went against the recommendation? We quickly found out that would not be the case, so we were good there. The second question about a claim that would potentially arise because of the virus, because of the pandemic, is a little more complicated. Most, if not all, plans do include an exclusion for a loss that results as the result of a virus or bacteria. Most of that is from and we had heard that a lot of private sector businesses had filed loss of income claims as a result of the shutdown, and all of those were shot down because, again, you can imagine from a financial standpoint. So with that being said, in order for us to have a claim filed that would have any validity behind it, there would be 2 instances that would have to be prevalent within this claim. One would be that it would have to be proved that it was contracted on district grounds or district-owned property like a school bus. And it also have to be the result of negligence on behalf of the district, not following the health and safety guidelines, or not following a direct order or mandate from the health department, which, again, we're not there. So if we're acting in good faith and following the safety protocols that are in place on a case-by-case basis, we would have coverage. There is some, again, not to be too windy here, but I just think this is an important thing to look at. Congress is also looking at, when they get back in session, legislative immunity for all entities throughout the United States that might deal with a potential lawsuit or claim as a result of this pandemic. So I think, and Mr. Hahn, I think echoes this, after our discussions with legal and insurance, and certainly there's a lot more aspects to consider as we make decisions, but in and of itself, the potential liability, financial liability, we don't think would preclude us or prevent us from doing in-person instruction or from having extracurricular activities, again, at this time, based on recommendations.
Mr. Hahn, quick question. So the letter from Dr. Albert that came out, that was a surprise. I just want to be clear. And I've had this asked several times, we had no idea that was coming until actually it was presented to us after the fact. I mean, everyone got it at the same time. So that happened on Thursday.
Yeah.
Is that right? And then immediately, I mean, we felt like we needed to act as far as the sports due to the insurance and everything. And that's why everything took the process that it did.
Yeah, so it's a great point. The Fairfield Department of Health has done a very good job. I do not want to sit here and bash the Fairfield Department of Health. I probably think they're understaffed, but the people that are there are good people that are working very hard. Specifically Larry Hanna, the administrator, and Tiffany Nash, the director of nursing. She's just now been reassigned to a different position, but they've got their hands full. And I'll be honest, since March, we had I think 4 or 5 meetings, either virtual or in person, since March with the Fairfield Department of Health. And we've had a lot of communication by email and phone calls, but I was not aware of Dr. Abbey, the health commissioner. Never met Dr. Abbey. And Wednesday morning, what I think would have been the 22nd, I received a text message that at our superintendent's meeting at noon, that the health department was going to be making this medical recommendation. Well, we got to the meeting, listened to them, and then they said that they would be putting that in writing. This is a letter that we received. And again, it says it is a recommendation, not an order or directive. School districts must weigh the medical advice they receive against the social, economic, and educational consequences of not having in-person when making their final decision about the initiation of school. Again, Travis and I have talked through what this meant to schools, but that was on the 23rd. On the 26th, obviously we received a letter that was, I believe the Eagle Gazette also published, from over 50 physicians in all kinds of medicine within Fairfield County. They work at the medical center. They understand the ICU. They understand the number of beds available. These things were all addressed, and that letter was published. On the 27th, we received this follow-up from the Department of Health, and again, in the second paragraph, it said, given the fluid nature of viral transmission, school plans should allow for a dynamic response based upon these changing numbers. With that in mind, we are revising our previous statement. We recommend that all Fairfield County school districts follow guidelines from the ODH and incorporate the Ohio COVID risk level guidelines into the reopening plan. They go on to talk about, we strongly believe that we can reduce the incidence by doing these items here that I've already talked about. So when that letter came out on I believe it was a Thursday, I asked that the superintendents be allowed to have a meeting with Dr. Abbey to understand what the intent and the purpose of this letter was, where it came from all of a sudden. Why, had the health department talked to Licking County, had they talked to Perry County, had they talked to Pickaway, Franklin? And this was a unilateral message by our health commissioner, my understanding. So it was a strong statement that had a huge impact on this county and other areas. So just wanted to explain that, first time I met Dr. Abbey was on Friday, the day after the letter came out. So that's a little bit about that background. And, Travis and I worked again with council to determine that, again, this is a recommendation, but they go on to clarify that there's a lot to consider when making decisions. We felt that we continue to have insurance from our carrier for liability, property, fleet, and that each one is looked at individually. So each case is looked at individually, you know, because somebody proved it was the only place that they were and they contracted COVID only at your school. Was somebody negligent or reckless, and did the school not follow CDC, Ohio Department of Health, and Fairfield Department of Health guidelines? So, you know, those were some of the things that we learned in that process. Any
Yeah,
questions?
anybody else have any questions in regards to that?
Okay. If there's not, I kind of want to jump into reviewing our restart plan. Bear with me 1 second. I'm not going to go through this. There's only a couple updates. I want you to know I met with, held a virtual meeting with our instructional staff, with our staff, had over 84 people logged in and attending. And that took place on Monday, not this past week, but the previous Monday. And listened, had some discussion, and there were two things that I heard from that conversation. And one of those was the issue of masks. Now, as the pandemic has evolved, as guidelines have evolved from June, you know, May, June, I think a lot of people thought that we're going to end school like we did, all remote, and that things would eventually get back to normal by the fall. And June was looking good. End of June, things started to increase. Early July, things started to change. So it's been pretty dynamic in that process. But one thing that has really continued to evolve is the benefits of wearing a mask indoors. I know that there are a lot of people that agree and disagree with that in general. Believe me, I've heard from our own staff members, our own parents that are at polar opposite ends of this, for themselves as adults and also for students. And in the Ohio Department of Health and Department of Education K-12 guidance document to reopen schools at DeWine, released on July 2nd, the only requirement, the only mandate was that staff wear masks. The state took the position that students in grades 3 to 12 are strongly recommended to wear masks. Well, we had followed those guidance and recommendations that came out in early July. We had to get things ready for the board meeting July 13th. The community wanted to know where we were going with our plan. So there was very little time, but that was the guidance we had. Now, most health officials continue, whether it's the CDC, Ohio Department of Health, or local Department of Health, most health professionals are saying that there are clear benefits to wearing these masks to help reduce the spread of the virus. Okay, so that has changed. A lot of people think, well, there's a level 3 mask mandate in the state or in the county. That does not apply to school districts. That particular order, if you read the order, K-12 public schools have to follow the Ohio Department of Health and Department of Education guidance document. However, you can do things above and beyond. The question is, it may be difficult to enforce, but there are clear benefits to listening to health professionals as the weeks and days and weeks go on. And that's what's continued to shift throughout the summer. So these plans are always fluid because the situation is changing daily. But I heard concerns about masks. And what people need to sometimes realize is that with the many different opinions, we're going to have a difficult time. I can't make a student stand for the Pledge of Allegiance or say the Pledge of Allegiance. I can't make a parent give their child a vaccination to come to school. They can object for personal reasons. All right. Now, we hope that they take precautions. We hope that they feel that there's something worthy about standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. But at the end of the day, I can't make them. If the state guidance documents don't support it, and the level 3 mask advisory for the county or the state mask mandate, if you read it, it exempts children 10 and under, but it also doesn't apply to schools to begin with. Well, 10 and under would be 5th grade. But I think that listening to the staff, many staff members, having a meeting with them, I met with a teacher representative the same week and told him that I think that if it means that we can get our schools open, maybe try to stay open, maybe limit the number of people exposed, because the Department of Health, the CDC and the Department of Health describes direct exposure to a COVID patient as being within 6 feet for 15 minutes, a cumulative of 15 minutes without a mask. So if we can help get our students in school by all making some sacrifices that may include wearing a mask to protect each other and protect our staff and keep our staff available for our students, as we talk about changes, these are one of them. I think as things continue to have evolved the last couple of weeks, I think not only is it a mandate for staff, and there are exceptions, medical exceptions, certain situations that are in the guidance, but at the same time, we need our students, we need our staff to feel safe. If we don't have teachers, if we don't have staff, if we don't have bus drivers, it's going to be real difficult to have in-person instruction. And I know that could be a controversial position, but I think it's worth it to protect the health and safety of our staff, keep them here, keep schools open. If we have a case, identifying who was without a mask, who was within 6 feet, who was more than 15 minutes, can have a big impact. Now, I know very well that the chances of us being shut down are real by either the county or the state. And if we can do anything possible to get our doors open, I think it's worth a try. I think our students need it. I still stand there. I don't plan on walking out of this meeting unless I hear something dramatically different and saying that we need to move to an all-remote online when I look at the entire scope. I think parents understand the importance and teachers understand the importance of children being in school. But if we have to wear masks so we can keep our doors open and keep each other safe, I think that's something that we should go above and beyond. We'll have issues to deal with. We'll have issues to deal with. And we'll deal with that on a case-by-case basis. But parents would be responsible to provide their child with a mask on the bus and in the classroom. And I would ask that if I have support in this, that we encourage families to start practicing now, to find a mask that is comfortable. Will we provide breaks? Can we provide breaks? Are there times where you're eating and you can't wear a mask? Absolutely. Are there times where you are doing physical exercise or activity and you're 6 feet apart and you can take a mask off according to the guidelines? Absolutely. If you're outside and you can get the kids 6 feet apart, obviously might be a good time to take a break, take the mask off. But I have to balance, and it's impossible because I can't get a consensus among the staff. People hear things, but then they call me individually or send me an individual email. Parents have multiple perspectives and opinions about this. But if it means opening our doors because we're wearing masks and our staff members are safe, I hope we can all make a sacrifice to potentially do that. And we do have an option that if parents are uncomfortable with anything, they can sign their child up for a student-led curriculum, an online curriculum, to see how things go for the first 9 weeks, first semester. I think those are all things to consider. But I wanted to share with the board.
Hey, Sean, just real quick, a couple things though. I mean, in regards to students wearing masks, if they obviously, if they have a physical ailment or some medical reason, you will have to provide a note, correct? I mean, we will require that.
Unless, so let me get to this here, but if we already have, students with disabilities, we have those things documented in their IEPs already. I'm not going to ask somebody to go get something that we already have. If they have a documented disability or we know that they have a health condition that's been turned in, that child may be exempt under those guidelines, okay? But those that would be a new situation, we may require that documentation. So,
Mr. Hunt, just to clarify, but, obviously masks, I get masks, but they can also substitute a face shield for them and get the same. Is that?
In certain learning situations where there's speech taking place, we have identified students with audiology services, speech. We've ordered masks for our teachers that teach students with hearing issues or speech pathologists. that work with students that actually you can wear a clear mask. I think we have 47 teachers in our district that work with 6 students with hearing issues. So not only the face shield, but they would have a clear mask where you can actually see the mouth of the teacher speaking. The speech pathologist might have to wear a face shield from time to time. Nurse,
Could the staff, regular third grade teacher also wear a mask if they felt it was more comfortable and if they could, or she?
Right.
in certain situations, if you look here, if there are the science teachers and the industry standards say when you're using a Bunsen burner, don't wear a cloth mask. Well, that would be a good time to put on a face shield. You know what I mean? So if students are in a science lab, if we can do in-person instruction, they wouldn't be wearing a mask. So those are things that, from an instructional standpoint, from a science lab dealing with fire, high school mainly, those labs are going to be deferred. We're going to work more on the basics of the lab, the math parts of the lab, and then try to do some of those labs in the second semester of the year, hopefully, to avoid some of those situations. So that would be an example. We were early on, before we even had Governor DeWine's guidance about staff being required to wear a mask, there's just unique situations where a face shield may be appropriate, but overall, we're also trying to protect the students. And a mask has more impact than a shield, but there are certain situations, certain areas that we may have to do that. Yeah.
I mean, Sean, I'll start the conversation because obviously this is going to be a hot topic for everyone here. I will support what you just said completely because the whole goal here for us, I think, is getting students back in classrooms, getting kids have activities, band, have soccer, whatever. I mean, anything that can help us get to where we need to be and be as safe as possible so we don't have to shut the school down or get rid of activities, I'm all for it.
Right.
I would agree with that. I mean, honestly, it seems like a small price to pay.
Right.
And obviously, everyone in here is here for a reason.
Mhm.
So if that's what we need to do, whether you agree with it or disagree, then keep our doors open and we can move forward. Let's do it, get past it.
There will be those people that say, see, you required masking, you still had to close. Well, yes, we may experience teacher absenteeism, bus driver absenteeism, and we gotta look at things. If we have teachers out due to illness, that's, you know, I mean, schools have had to close before, even during flu season, when you have so many staff members out. It's been a long time. I've been in other districts where that's happened. I can't remember my 7 years here where that has happened, but if we can keep our staff, to me, it's just a small price to pay to keep them active, involved, feeling safe. And again, I mean, you got to understand, these things were being developed in mid-June. There's meetings under the gun, timeframes, you're trying to get the guidance. And we've always said there's a disclaimer at the bottom of every slide that these things are subject to change as conditions evolve. And I think based upon the last 3 weeks, 2 weeks where health professionals are, I think that they're saying that there are clear benefits. And we just ask that if we can get our schools open, that you guys will support me if I, in a couple of days, get messages out that, you know, we're going to change that requirement for students and that it's going to be not strongly recommended, but it's going to be, you know, required. So I think that can go a long way with the staff, and I personally believe it's in our best interest as well. A month and a half ago, I might have had a different opinion, but I think you got to keep an open mind. So.
And Sean, I want to say too, I mean, I'm in full support of that as well. I think we all feel whatever it takes to get kids back in school.
Yeah.
I feel like our community feels that way. I'm really proud of the administration for listening to the teachers. I know that was a major concern. And I think that families who may not agree with that decision have to remember that I also want to commend the school district for offering an option.
Yeah.
If they don't feel comfortable with their kid wearing masks, they have an option to stay home.
Yeah.
I don't want anybody to forget that. We've given multiple avenues here to continue to educate your kid through Bloom Carroll.
Right.
And so everyone still has a choice. And while
Yeah.
every decision is imperfect, you have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want to commend you for listening to the teachers, their concerns, and again, remind families that, you know, Bloom Carroll did come to the table with an option for families that have those concerns.
Yeah.
So,
And again, I was there, I mean, I had, you know, there's laws about conducting, you can't conduct board business behind closed doors. You gotta do it publicly like this. So, I mean, I had these conversations, last Monday, I was quickly moving in that direction, but to hear it reaffirmed by the staff, and then a couple days later to meet with a representative, I said that I'd already, in my mind, made that decision, but before I announce these kinds of things, I can't blindside the board. I gotta have meetings with the board. I wanna be able to explain the message. In some ways, people might say control the message. And now people are gonna walk out here tonight, they're gonna post things all over social media. That's the world, unfortunately, that we're living in. But I will have a message updating the community on where we are, what has happened over the last week, what have been the topics of concern, the changes we're making, which would be the mask. And then the other thing is to look at would be on our hybrid schedule, which is the one we're trying to open on right now, the one that the board decided on July 13th. So we have 4 levels of instruction that we foresee happening. Green, which is a 5-day-a-week schedule with safety protocols. All these have safety protocols. Yellow status is our hybrid with 2 groups, 2 cohorts, a Monday, Wednesday, and scheduled Fridays group, and then a Tuesday, Thursday scheduled Fridays. One update for the board, I've changed the terminology. Rather than saying every other Friday, we talked about it not being every other Friday because you have so many you have 6 Monday holidays. If the group on Monday misses school, they need to be in school on Friday. And that balances out and equals out the number of instructional days for both groups of students. If you don't do that, then you end up with one group going 91 days compared to 85 for the other group. So just in terms of how we talk to people, saying scheduled Fridays I think it's more accurate. We have the orange level, which could be the health department. We need to assess. We maybe had an exposure, we had a case, might need to shut down for a couple days, transition to remote or online learning, or if the whole district has to transition due to staff absenteeism, cases, increased spread, the health department saying it's no longer a recommendation, it's an order, or if we jump into level 4 as a county, then we might need to go to an all red status, which is your all remote or online. But as we look at the yellow schedule, the hybrid alternating day schedule, I wanted to take a look at the calendar here. It's kind of tough to see, but one thing that I have struggled with is parents. The ones that I've heard honestly from about one parent in the past 3 months that said, please don't open schools. Okay? The rest of them have been clear, please open your schools. My child needs structure. My child needs to be in school. We're giving away too much time. They lost, the online learning in the fall is not near the quality that you get with in-person instruction. A lot of other concerns that parents have. I want to get our kids in school as soon as possible, but I want our staff members to be prepared and to feel safe and have the training and time that they need to get there. And in June, early June, when we have a board meeting, what was it, June 8th maybe? Things were definitely different. And really to change the school calendar, in the revised code, you have to have a public hearing, you have to wait 30 days. It really needed to be done at that point, but it didn't look like that was going to need to be done. So rather than, and going through that process now, we simply don't have time to do that, okay? And there is board policy that allows me to close schools, delay schools, for many reasons. And that policy is emergency closings, EBCD, and it says the superintendent may close the schools, dismiss students early, or delay the opening of schools in the event of hazardous weather, like in the wintertime when we're dealing with things, or other circumstances where the superintendent determines a closure, dismissal, or delay is necessary. So as we look at this, it would be nice to get our kids back to school as soon as possible, which is scheduled for August 20th for the first group. But if we provide a full week of professional development and planning time for our staff, our new staff comes in on August 14th, a Friday. If we could provide all our returning staff members August 17th through the 21st, that's 2 additional days of professional development time. And we have some things to go over, some virtual learning academy, safety procedures, meeting with school nurses, conducting training, coming to grips with how the school year is going to look. What I feel that I'm going to do in the next day or two is call a calamity day on the 20th and the 21st, which is Thursday and Friday. That takes 1 instructional day in the first 9 weeks away from the students, because we had a group starting on Thursday and another group starting on Friday. So that will give our staff more planning time, more preparation time, more professional development time. And then group 1 would start on Monday, August 24th, and group 2 would start their first instructional day on the yellow status hybrid schedule. They would start on Tuesday the 25th. So again, I can close schools. We have board policy. I don't need any board action to do that. And I think it would be beneficial for our staff to have that time. But again, I haven't been able to talk to you about this until today. But I think the 2 main concerns was we need more time and we need masks on our students.
Quick question. So how would kindergarten staggering work through all this to give those teachers the planning time?
There would be no change.
Okay.
We would keep the same kindergarten staggered start schedule, which would still be the 27th and 28th for kindergarten.
Okay.
The principal will communicate to those parents when they start, but she's planning on keeping the same rotation, the same calendar. I'm sorry, she'll go group 2 on the 27th, and then the 28th would be group 1. But we will communicate, and she will communicate that plan. No changes to the kindergarten schedule, only grades 1 to 12. We would back up. We would not go to school on the 20th and 21st. Our staff would be having planning and professional development time. And then we'll start on the 24th with group 1 and the 25th with group 2. And
Mr. Ron,
yeah,
the emails we've been getting from the teachers, obviously we're hearing a little bit that those 2 calamity days or 1 calamity day, that's what they're looking for, is that?
yeah. I mean, it certainly helps.
Okay.
I mean, there's those that want more. There's those that feel that anything right now would be helpful. And to have a full week, I think is it's not going to make everybody happy. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's going to be parents that say, man, I want to get my kid back in school now. But there's going to be teachers that say we need more time. And my job is always to try to keep this going, to keep these plates spinning and keep them all from falling. And it can be a challenge because, like I said, some people will feel it's unnecessary, but I feel students in school is really necessary, but I also feel that providing staff with the adequate time is also important. So all it does, the first quarter, both groups of kids would have 20 in-person days. You would see for the year, group 1 would have 87 days and group 2 would have 87 in-person days. So it's if you talk about green, there's issues with the green normal schedule right now. If you talk about the hybrid schedule, there's issues with it. At least they get to go to school and get some in-person. They have some routine where it's not that they have 6 days off in a row or 10 days off in a row. Our kids are always engaged on Monday. They have lessons with our teachers. Half the kids on the buses, half the kids in the classroom. The teachers giving an in-person instruction in their normal day. As they look at what they assign for homework or a task, those things have to be looked at as on Tuesday, the group that I'm instructing on Monday, on Tuesday they're completing those remote tasks, maybe a couple review or practice problems or some topic that they're looking at independently like they do with homework. And then on when those kids come back on Wednesday, the teacher has a new lesson for them. So it might introduce a new topic, it might be a review of something they just covered. From an instructional standpoint, we can't cover all the standards. Testing is going to be removed. Those growth measures are going to be removed. They won't be able to be used. But we have to identify instructionally the power standards at each grade level. And our teachers can do that with our curriculum director. And we can identify what is essential, what's the most important thing, and do the best we can do under these circumstances. So to me, it's still better than all all online, and if I'm listening to our parents, they did not want to be online. So this is a way to provide that social distancing, provide more time, make some safety adjustments. And so the mask and the schedule are the two things that I felt were really the changes going into this with our opening plan.
Sean, thanks again for listening to the teachers. I feel like you've done the best without having to change the whole year schedule. Just to be clear, on the yellow hybrid schedule, teachers are at home. They're not in the building, even though kids are out.
I'm sorry?
On a hybrid schedule, teachers are teaching from home. They're not in the building.
No.
They're in the building.
Yeah, they have a group, they have, if they have a class of 25, they'll have around half those students on Monday, and then the next day on Tuesday, they have the other half in person.
Right, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah.
That question's coming.
Any,
Sean, has there been any changes to that hybrid that you made or anything like that from when we've gone over the past couple of meetings?
just, this would be the only schedule change, and we would have an updated calendar ready and available on our website and communicated in a communication this week that would show the 20th and 21st are now PD days.
So nothing other than that?
Nothing other than that. That would be the only change to that calendar. The other item, so when this all came about, last week, obviously we thought, oh my goodness, we have a remote learning plan, and we did one in the spring, but it really needed refined. We needed more structure to it. We needed more direct virtual instruction every day, scheduled with students, and our staff got so much better as we went on through that 9 weeks. But we need to do even better if we find ourselves in a remote learning situation this school year. So when the letter came out, I quickly pulled the administrative team, all of our directors and supervisors together, and I said, look, if we start on an all remote red status, with kids all at home, this is going to be difficult. Starting kindergarten remotely, not meeting your teacher, it's going to be a challenge. So there are some things that I kind of want to go over as well, because even though you hear me saying loud and clear that I want to stay on this hybrid schedule to get school open, there's always a possibility that something else could happen. The governor could shut us down, for example. So if we have a red schedule, a hybrid schedule, the other schedule changes I would make would include, taking the 20th and the 21st and calling calamity days. That's a Thursday and a Friday. It would also include taking the 24th and the 25th and calling calamity days. All right? What we would do during that time is grades K to 4 would have individual appointments with students or their parent in person, because we don't have the open houses and things and distributing learning materials and items. So in grades K to 4, we would take those 4 days, the 20th through the 25th, and we would do individual appointments, either in person or virtual, whatever the family would really want. And we would distribute school items during that time, textbooks, other novels and things that they use that we have. In grades 5 to 12, we would use those 4 days to open up the school, have a process in the cafeteria at the high school as well. And we would also distribute school items, have virtual meetings with students about how the first day of instruction will look remotely, okay? With that, our first day of engagement, if we had to switch to red before the school year starts, the first day of instruction, teacher virtual instruction, would be the 26th. That's a Wednesday. And this is only on the red schedule, okay? Kindergarten would still do the 27th and the 28th. No changes to the kindergarten schedule, because they have appointments too leading up to that. So we felt like there were some other things that we needed to continue to look at with the all-remote plan. The all-remote plan is on our website. It will be updated, but it includes operating or teaching under a red or orange status level, 100% all online or remote. There are clear expectations for teachers, for the district leadership, including myself, for our students and for our families to make this work, hopefully better in every school district than it did in the spring. One thing we would do, it's been clear, in the spring, we were permitted by law, by the health order, to bring our staff in. We did not. It was very flexible. We just were trying to get our feet on the ground, provide some instruction. But it's always been permissible to bring classified staff, teaching staff into our buildings. If we find ourselves in that situation, our plan is to bring our staff in, but we would have some flexibility because we understand the dynamics of teaching in an all-remote environment. So what we talked about to get this, I mean, this is literally Friday, trying to get it ready for Monday for the school board. That's, I mean, it's tough, but the students' daily online instructional schedule would be in grades K to 4, the student day would be a block of instruction from 9:30 to 11:30. Students would have lunch and a brain break and physical activity from 11:30 to 12:30. Students would then have an afternoon block from 12:30 to 2:30. They don't have to be fully being instructed online for those 4 hours. It may involve multiple areas that you're teaching a reading literacy lesson. It may take 30 minutes, and then the kids go work on it, and you check back in 15 minutes later, or 20 minutes later, or you leave your Google Meets up, and kids can ask questions as you're interacting and working with them, okay? So there would be 2 blocks in grades K to 4 for instruction. A teacher workday is 7.5 hours. As a parent, as a superintendent, even if we're all online, I don't want my child on a computer for 7.5 hours a day. So there are 2 blocks of time that would be a maximum of 4 hours of virtual instruction. The teacher schedule, and I'm thinking about those, just the dynamics of those with children, young children trying to find daycare coverage, babysitters in that situation. Now this isn't to our elementary staff, it's not dramatically different because most of them report around 8:30 anyway contractually. But the teacher's daily schedule in grades K to 4 would involve an hour of planning. Contractually, we only have to give them 40 consecutive minutes. So it gives them an hour of planning. We know this is more difficult than face-to-face. They would have an hour of planning and collaboration. They would provide instruction from that 9:30 to 11:30 block. I would foresee a second grade team of teachers working, having the same lesson, teaching their 25 kids virtually from their classroom, in front of their computer with their camera, and sharing resources with the students, interacting, asking questions. In Google Meets, there's so many extensions and things you can do. You can take attendance. You can put kids in pods where they can work. 4 kids could work on something, 4 kids could, you could see them all, and those 4 kids would just be talking to each other, but you could have all 25 kids that you are instructing. All right, so there's more structure to the student day, to the staff day, to provide direct instruction rather than saying, here it is, good luck, email me if you need me, okay? So 11:30 to 12:30, the staff would have lunch and office hours. We know they're gonna have emails. By contract, we only have to give them 30 minutes for lunch. Most of them right now get anywhere from 40 minutes to 60 minutes. So they would still get that time in excess of the contract, but they would also, maybe have to return some calls or some emails during that time. From 12:30 to 2:30, they would have their second instructional block. The kids would rejoin for maybe a math lesson. Okay, maybe one of the aides that does a STEM activity a couple times a week jumps in and does a STEM activity with the kids and that classroom teacher. So this will be figured out more at the building level with the principals and the staff, but again, I'm trying to set the big picture with our administrative team. So there's that 2-hour block in the afternoon, and then teacher collaboration from 2:30 to 3. If you do the math, that's only 6.5 hours. So our teachers are paid for 7.5. So I'm being pretty flexible with this proposal, okay? Plenty of planning time in excess of what they typically get out of respect for how challenging online teaching can be. We could even do some PD in there to help them on these days. There would be a 1 hour, right now it says in the evening, that's probably a poor choice of words, but 1 hour of flex or administrative time that we know our teachers are working. If I kept them at school for 7.5 hours, I know they're still putting in time beyond their workday. I see it all the time. So this would be a flexible hour to get to 7.5 hours. to deal with tasks, emails, phone calls, maybe additional student check-ins and support. So most students aren't going to be available at 7 in the morning for instruction. Parents getting up at 5 a.m. to run kids around and parents get to work, it's going to be tough. So this 9:30 time is a little bit later, but I think more people are available, students at 9:30 and again at 12:30. So that's the K-4 schedule. The middle school and high school would have a similar schedule from a teaching standpoint. The student day would involve 9 periods. We have 9 periods in our middle school and high school. They would have 30-minute periods, and that is because teachers need a 30-minute lunch. So they would have scheduled times for students to be checking in, receiving instruction during that time. Again, the lesson may last 15 minutes, it may last 20 minutes. It may involve some independent work, but every day our students would be expected to have a scheduled time where they're checking in on their schedule. The teacher daily instructional schedule would involve middle school and high school staff arriving at 8:30. Again, that's keeping in mind all the challenges with our own personal families and getting people here, but they would have a planning and collaboration time for an hour in the morning. They would be teaching from 9:30 to 2:40, and in that 9-period day, every teacher has a lunch and another planning period. So that's in addition to the planning time in the morning. They would also have teacher collaboration time, maybe department chairs are meeting with their departments. Maybe there's students that aren't checking in, that they need to talk to principals, families, those kinds of things, but that would be from 2:40 to 3. And then you would have 1 hour for administrative tasks as well. So their workday would be 6.5 hours here, and then recognizing that there's other items for them to complete during the day. So other things that I want to point out about that, excuse me.
So I'm not bothered, I didn't see the word on site in this first,
Okay,
and
No,
it's just for, it's been a question come across a couple times. So
sure.
that was,
Yeah, so the student day and staff day, I would want to, obviously, we would use our website. We would have a grade level template available on our website. Under our academics tab, we have remote learning resources. We would have our plan here, and then assignments will be listed by grade level in grades K to 4. And then 5 to 12, we use Schoology, which is a learning management system, and students would be directed to their Schoology accounts. Staff members also are starting to use more and more Google Classroom. At K to 4, the emphasis would be on literacy and math, video conferencing daily with students. And then same thing at the high school, you have your normal schedule, so the kids get all their classes, whether it's agriculture or whatever it might be, but Schoology and Google Classroom with teacher interaction daily. There would be an expectation for students to log in and participate, and we are working with the Department of Education on how attendance will be monitored and done, and that will have more information coming, but we would expect our students to participate in the lessons. We would want to make sure that we're following due dates. In the spring, we were very flexible. We said, by the end of the grading period. Well, to really teach and move on, we have to be able to assess and determine if students are ready to move on with the next lesson. So we have to adhere to some due dates. I do think flexibility is important. I think feedback to the students is important, very specific feedback, and even resubmitting for mastery. But if they don't resubmit, eventually they're going to have to earn the grade that they earned. But we would use our grading scale as well, because scholarships at the high school level, class rank, those things are all important for colleges. A lot of schools did pass-fail in the spring, and they found out, this is going longer than what we thought into the fall of 20, and it can have a big impact if you don't use your district-approved grading scale. I want to point out that the students that need a device in an all-remote environment could fill out a form, or their parents, and we would have a device available, just like we did in the spring, if they needed one and did not have one at home. Feeding students, this kind of goes into my next topic a little bit, but we feel that if we are closed completely, we have a lot of classified staff, bus drivers, what do we do with them? Custodians, what do we do with them? If there are not students here, we have staff here that we have to clean up after and disinfect and get trash and sweep the floors and all those things. But what about your evening? And do we really need them? I want to address that in our opinion. Travis and I have talked about this a lot. But we also have food service personnel. All right, well, if they're not preparing lunches, or if they're only preparing lunches for 60 kids that signed up based upon offering lunch to free and reduced lunch students, we don't need an entire staff. However, so the board, I could make a recommendation for a reduction in force. We could lay people off. I'll be honest. There's a lot of these food service, bus drivers, cooks, custodians, all this, that they're residents in our school district. They're people that live here. They would be, if they're laid off, they're going to move on to other jobs. They're going to find another opportunity. If we are told that now our schools are going to open, these people have to pass background checks. Drivers have to be trained and have a license. Trying to find custodians and cooks within a matter of a couple days to restaff will be impossible if they move on. So I think we can do things in a remote learning to expand our services. I think we might have to reassign some of our custodians to some fall outdoor work, or maybe look at moving more to the day, moving a couple from the evening to the day to potentially clean up and disinfect more areas when our staff is present, but we also have to be able to clean when they're gone. So I think we can find things for some of them. With our food service, how would we use them? Well, we could expand our food service program. We can offer meals to every student, a hot meal to every student in our district if they want to sign up for one, whether they're on free or reduced lunch or not. We can receive reimbursement through the Seamless Summer option in the National Schools Lunch Program, that even for a student that doesn't qualify for free and reduced lunch, if we provide them a meal during a closure, that we can get reimbursement for the cost of that meal up to a certain amount, as long as we don't prepare $6 meals. You know what I mean? You can balance that out with the reimbursement. So how would we do this? We have a Google form. Parents could sign their children up on the form if they wanted to. If they wanted their child to receive, a hot meal, we would bring our food service in early in the morning and start preparing those meals. We would use our bus drivers. We have about 20 of them. Let's say we had 10 driving. We preferably don't want to put them on the bus. Travis is looking at insurance and liability. It might be cheaper to put them in their own cars and reimburse them for mileage than it is to run our buses, have maintenance and labor costs, and the gas mileage is terrible on school buses. So we could use our 10 drivers to drive a car or a bus if we have to, and then the other 10 could ride on one of those buses or in those cars, because you can't park a bus on a road and run up to a house and deliver meals. You need somebody to do that with you. So we could take the rest of the drivers, assign them to another route to ride with the driver. We could deliver meals to students, and I would propose, what I want to do right now is that meals would be delivered to any BC student at any BC address, even if your child is staying at a friend's, because that's where they go during the day for daycare or supervision. We could still deliver to any student at a BC address, and we would deliver to any daycare or latchkey program in our school district, or from Gender Road down to downtown Lancaster. So that keeps our cooks providing services, nutrition to our students. It provides our transportation drivers with a purpose. If we lay these people off, they're going to lose income. We do have income tax in our district. Our revenue will be down. I will not be able to find staff to quickly, half of our staff is classified. I'll have a teaching staff, but if I don't have bus drivers and cooks and custodians, I still can't open the schools. So we would prefer, we know this pain is temporary. In my opinion, the pain might be 6 months, it might be another 9 months, but it's temporary. And if we can keep these people employed and get through this tough time, then I would prefer, Travis and I would prefer to do that. Travis, I don't know if you have anything to say about how unemployment works to begin with.
No, I've been through a reduction in force before, and it's not pleasant. And it has legal fees in and of itself. And technically, normally a reduction in force only occurs for financial reasons. or for a significant drop in enrollment, which theoretically, we don't have that currently. Obviously, if this were to go on more than the next 12 months, heaven forbid, we might have to look at it differently, but certainly, I think through the plan that we have laid out, and again, this is assuming we would be on the red schedule, as opposed to the hybrid yellow schedule that we're currently shooting for. I just think that this plan would work throughout any type of school closure.
I think it's a great idea. Travis, can you have those figures for us for the August meeting?
I'm sorry?
Can you have those comparison of the figures that Sean was referring to for the August meeting?
Yes, yes.
It'll be a challenge because we don't know how many kids
Yeah.
will sign up in a remote learning environment. That's one challenge, but if anybody, Travis can figure it out probably. All right, any questions about the student day, staff day, or services offered if we had to go remote at any point of the year? It might take a day or two before we're ready to provide lessons, and we would communicate that. If we were shut down on a Wednesday, I'm not saying Thursday, we would definitely have the class meetings. It might be the following Monday that would happen, but any questions about that schedule? I think it provides more structure, more accountability for everybody.
I think what the question will be, and I don't have really many questions here, Sean, either. I think you will probably get into this when we talk about athletics and activities later. But if we were on red, I'm sure that people in here kind of want to have an idea of what's going on. Do you want to wait to talk about that, or would you like to talk about this now?
Yeah, no, I can transition into it. So I kind of interrupted that transition to athletics with a district health and safety guideline, a pledge. It's not a waiver. We're expected to provide some level of instruction, whether it's online or face-to-face. And I have worked with our legal counsel, but if we're going to keep schools open, we need to make sure that parents and students and staff members are all making a commitment to do everything we can to keep schools open. We understand that it can be an inconvenience when you could be a single parent and your child is sick and you're asked to go to work. Traditionally, pre-pandemic, families are put in tough situations sometimes, but we cannot really take those types of risks. So we want to make sure, this would be a form, it's called the Bulldog Pledge form, that we would upload into Final Forms for parents and students and staff to sign off, that we're asking that they make a commitment to stay home or keep sick students home if they have a fever or any of those symptoms listed by the CDC, that parents are reporting absences, that we're all working together to remind children about healthy habits with washing hands, how to cover your mouth or nose with a tissue and a cough or a sneeze, not sharing personal items, avoiding close contact when possible, trying to keep their hands to themselves rather than, it's such a challenge, especially, I guess, with all kids, but these are things that we would want people to understand, that we have some basic expectations and we all have a responsibility and need to take this serious. And the only reason is because we want our kids in school as much as possible. So this is a pledge form. It'd be a back to school form for everybody. Just wanted to share it with you, and a lot of districts are using it. It just communicates what the expectation is. So any questions about that? Okay. All right. So athletics.
Hey,
66.
Sean, you want to ask Mr. Bratton real quick if he has any questions or comments? I don't know.
Mr. Bratton, can you hear me?
I can you hear me?
Yep. Do you have any comments or questions?
So I would just, I'll go all the way back maybe a little bit while you're getting ready to talk about athletics. Completely support, I think, face coverings. I think, if I think about a school district, right, I think about what's the most important thing within that school district. I think it's the teachers and the administrators that drive that. Why do we have folks that always want to come to Bloom Carroll? I don't think it's because of our really old buildings. Luckily, we're getting new ones. But it's because I think of the teachers and the administrators and staff that you just brought up. Really appreciate you thinking of the custodians, the cooks, and repurposing. 100% support that, and doing everything we can to keep them employed. going through those reductions is no fun. The only other comment I was going to make from a remote learning, if we do go that route, I like the idea that we have a plan. Obviously, no one had the ability to have a plan when we were thrown into this in March. And I like this structure idea. Again, I think we talked about that even with kids going to school. One of the biggest things, especially kids K to 4, is structure. They would have some of that. Again, I don't want my child online for 4 to 6 hours a day, but I think that provides that. So appreciate you putting that together. I think that from a parent perspective at least, I think really shows that we're thinking through some of that. Obviously, we'll need additional training for the staff, which they brought up, which I think is very important. So those are my comments. Just want to make sure you understood where I was at as well on getting these kids. I think if you my non-scientific survey, the majority of kids that I've spoken with would say I would gladly wear a mask to be in school. So they would much rather wear a mask and be in school than not be in school and online at home. Which I think shows, again, kids are also willing to buy into that. I mean, we'll have some bumps in the road, but I think kids buying into it too is important.
Good deal.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else before we move into athletics? Okay.
I like everything here. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, anything that we can do to get kids in school by far is the way I look at it, but being as safe as possible. And these plans you put together, I know you've done it in a pretty quick fashion, but all in all, I'm impressed by your work, number one. But number two, I think we're trying to meet the goal as a school board and try to get kids in athletics, activities, you name it. But we also have to compromise too. Some views might be different, but I mean, at the end of the day, my goal is to have kids to have either their senior year, their last year playing whatever, get a scholarship because of their grades. I think we're in a good place right now. I admire you for coming up with this plan and putting in all our hard work. We know you've been working hard, but you told us things earlier, but thank you for really working hard and getting all this put together in a short time period.
Sure.
I 100% agree with everything you decided and the rest of the board members on everything. I think you've done a great job. The only thing I know we talked about in the last couple of meetings, we'll just have to work through is policing the face masks to the kids and the parents. Are we supplying them? We got to really make sure that's clear. If they get on the bus without a mask, are we going to allow them on the bus, or are they going to have to stay home? I think that's the next big step we'll have to work through, but after that, I think we're in a great path.
No, you're exactly right. Don't have an answer for everything yet,
Right.
but I want to be clear that parents, I'll give you an idea. I mean, if masks are $1 each, you got 2,000 kids, you're giving them a disposable mask a day, or even 50 cents, you're spending $1,000 a day if they're 50 cents, $2,000 a day if they're $1. And I mean, multiply that by 176 student days, you're going to spend $180,000 to $360-some thousand on face masks. And Travis can tell you how much our budget was cut at the end of fiscal year 20, and we are being funded at that same rate for fiscal year 21. But we've had a ton of expenses for things. But I think most people at this point have a mask. We are providing our staff with washable cloth masks. We bought about 600 of those. We bought over 225 face shields for our staff members. Obviously, the masks are going to be predominantly the one that we have to use. But I don't think it's tough. We can require masks, but I don't think we can provide them to students. Now, with that said, I have asked maintenance, our maintenance director. He's ordered up to 10,000 masks, disposable. So we've spent, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 so far on disposable face masks. We had about 2,000 in stock for nurses and things that if a child showed illness, they'd have to be masked, isolated. But with this decision, last week that I was committed to and sharing with you tonight, I think that we're going to need to have a lot more available in those situations. and we can't provide them to every kid, but if a student gets on the bus, I want the bus driver to have a stack of 20 to say, hey, please take one, you know? So that's kind of the approach we've taken. So,
Yeah, that's the only hiccup I see we might have to work through one, I mean, that's gonna be once school starts running.
Yeah.
I hope we'll have to manage that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you've done a great job, and I hope we've covered everybody's concerns.
yeah, good deal. All right, athletics. I'm going to start off by saying this.
Can I say something?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Joe.
Again, I didn't know if you were gonna say something. Okay. Quick question, I might be getting out of order, but, again, small price to pay, to wear the mask, get out of school, I think it's important. As far as the staff, the custodians, kitchen staff, bus drivers, you know, it's gonna be tougher on them this year. Hopefully we're willing to battle through it with the teachers and everyone, just because what we're gonna be asking as far as cleaning the buses and but one thing, and this is more of a question than anything that I've been thinking about. So, you know, we keep talking about online. What I hate to see is this online replace the staff,
Mhm.
basically technology replacing the teachers. So,
Right.
what I'm concerned about is if we don't go back to school, you know, we lose a quarter of these kids to
Yeah.
online
Yeah.
teaching. I mean, from
Yeah.
long term, a year from now, 2 years from now.
Mhm.
Well, just for easy numbers, and I was figuring this out earlier, but we got basically 2,200 kids, and if we lose 25% of them a year from now,
Yeah.
basically it's 550 kids at
Yeah.
$6,400 a kid. It's
Yeah.
$3.5 million.
Right.
So,
Now, that would be if they signed up for an online option other than Blue Care,
They have
Correct.
the virtual learning.
Right, if they left us, if they
yeah,
left
if
us.
they left us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a possibility.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I'm just kind of reiterating how important it is to get back into school
Yeah.
as safely as we can.
Right.
So basically, we would be out $3.5 million, 550 kids, roughly 20 teachers.
Yeah.
At that time, what do we
Yeah.
do?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of ways to look at that. I mean, even if the state said your school shut down for the first semester for all year, by law, and it's not something I want to do, but by law, I can assign up to 125 students to one teacher online for online learning. So really, you would only need about 2 teachers per grade level at the elementary. We've got 175, students roughly in a class. You could do that. Now, I have no interest in doing that because I think this is temporary, but you would be permitted. So being online for a long time is not a good thing at all.
I mean, you're seeing it in colleges now, everything's,
Yeah.
so much of it's online. I just think we need to be cautious. You know.
Yeah, and if we don't offer, if we can keep them here with VLA, we only have right now about 80 students signed up for this virtual learning option. It's not even 1 kid per teacher on average. I think we have 11 in our high school. The most we have is like 12 in a grade at 3rd grade, and then I think 10 at 4th grade and 12 at 5th grade right now. So, if you have 7 teachers in the 5th grade, I mean, you're not even talking on average two VLA students per teacher to have that subgroup and push assignments out to. But, if people left us, if students left us, or if we were shut down for a long time, those are all things that could happen that some districts will do, that are in really tough times. So, yeah, you want to be careful with that. I feel our teachers can really engage our students better on this schedule, face-to-face, instructing their 25 students. And that's what I think, and then try to get in school as much as possible. But I'll be honest, the red plan is there because I think we have to have a plan.
Right.
I don't want to use it. I don't want to use it at all. So I want to get to green at some point. I want everybody to get settled. I want us to be able to live with this, do it safely, have things improve from a virus perspective, a medical perspective, and when we can get to green as soon as possible, I think that's the goal. But I also think we talked about it at the last meeting. There's a lot of benefits to kids who've never gone to school in a pandemic. They've never had to deal with this. Having smaller groups, easing into this, training each other, and starting off, where we're not overwhelming people, I think is a good approach. And some people ask, well, just commit the whole 9 weeks to it. Just do it all 9 weeks. Well, We could, but if I make that commitment, we could go red 2 days in. We could go red 4 weeks in. You know, so I don't want to put a time frame on it. But our goal is to be in session as much as possible. So with sports, I want to be clear, there's a lot of concern or panic, I think, this week, but it goes back to where our discussion started, or our presentation started, that we didn't know with the recommendation if we still had coverage. So at the end of Friday, we said, hold on, let's put sports on hold. If we have a case out here and people contract COVID, do we even have insurance? Do we have any basic liability insurance? So the last week of July, we've put our athletic trainings that we've been doing since June on hold. Ohio High School typically allows sports to start on August 1st. We would treat band the same as, the OMEA is not offering any state competitions in band, but we would still allow band participation similar to athletics. And if we get to have athletics, we would still have our band, I would hope, if they're able to perform at events in a safe, manageable way. So when I'm talking about sports, please know I'm also talking about our marching band being included with safety procedures and guidelines, okay? But here's what I know, and it's not much, but here's what I know, is that if it wasn't for some kind of activity in my life, I wouldn't be sitting here today or living in this community. Activities made a difference in my life and allowed me the opportunity to go to college. My parents didn't go to college. My brother did not go to college. I got to go to college because of activities. And in that time, I grew up and I learned what was important. And that stuff all left me, but I learned a lot of valuable skills that I've applied to raising a family, to trying to be successful and committed to a community, to each other, to plan, to work hard. And I think what we learn in extra and co-curricular activities is invaluable. And my intent, with board support, and as long as we are operating within the Ohio Department of Health, the Fairfield Department of Health, the Ohio High School Athletic Association, within the district, within the Mid-State League guidelines, and within guidance from legal and our insurance companies, my goal is to offer sports at every level of instruction. There are schools that have already committed, that are already online in this county, that are still offering activities to students after their instructional day. It may not start till 3:30, but they're still offering those opportunities within our athletic league. There will be schools that we lose for certain reasons, non-league games, and counties that are shut down or shut down sports. But if we can continue to offer as much physical activity and structure and give our kids something to look forward to besides sitting in their room on a computer and having nothing, then I feel this is different in a pandemic than it is when I have to call a snow day and it's not safe to go to practice or have a game. People typically say when you shut down schools, you shouldn't offer sports. I'm going to disagree on this one, this time. Typically, yes, but in this environment, I feel like our students need something. And if the state's going to allow it to happen within safety guidelines that the health department is approving as well, and we are able to operate safely, there's something different about being in school all day in a classroom, in a modular classroom packed shoulder to shoulder, than it is playing volleyball with 12 kids in the gym spread out more than 6 feet apart for an activity. Yes, we may have to limit capacity. You may have to say only parents are allowed and they have to be 6 feet apart if they're not within the same family. But if we can offer that, we've had athletics going on because the State Department of Health allowed it specifically during the school closure order in June. That school closure order lasted to June 30th, and they allowed training starting on May 26th. So we were able to do some things starting in the middle of June all the way through the summer. Now, what people also have to understand is these are Department of Health orders. They're often very long, many pages, 11, and you have to read things that are very specific. There's contradictions between the Ohio Department of Health and the Ohio High School Athletic Association. The governor's office is now working with Ohio High School. Rec leagues, travel leagues, those things are completely different and fall under these health orders. But when decisions are made by the Department of Health, those can impact how Ohio High School Athletic Association operates. And our sports in grades 7 through 12 operates under the Ohio High School Athletic Association. They've grouped sports into non-contact or low contact and contact sports. Right now, the Ohio High School is moving forward. We get communication a couple times a week from Ohio High School. And last night, we were notified, the superintendents were notified that we are still on track for lower non-contact sports like golf, tennis, girls tennis, and volleyball to begin practices on August 1st. That's Saturday. Okay, I needed some time to talk to the board. We've told our athletic department if we're allowed, if we can move forward, if we have insurance, if the state doesn't shut sports down, that our goal is to open sports back up on August the 3rd. We needed to pause this week to know if we had insurance. We needed to, honestly, after the summer, we just kind of needed to let things settle for this week, let people stay healthy with the hope that we can start. You're seeing other schools and school districts that have had cases that have had to shut down. It will happen. We'll have a team where something happens and we'll have to shut down or isolate certain people. But our goal is to start back up. I've asked Mr. Little to schedule a meeting with all the coaches. We have very specific safety guidelines that Ohio High School has put into place and that the district has developed. We have a student athlete waiver because an extracurricular, going to school is required. You're required to go to school. Can't do a waiver for school. We can do a pledge, okay? But participating in an extracurricular activity after school is an option. You do not have to participate. You do not have to do it. It's completely up to that individual. So we have worked with legal counsel to contain risk and have a waiver for our fall athletes if we choose to move forward with sports. We would have a meeting with the coaches tomorrow night, and we would be going over, Mr. Little will be going over those. I'm going to make a clear message that you have to understand what the expectations are for your sport from Ohio High School, the Department of Health, and from the district. And you have to enforce those. The minute you don't enforce those, your sport could be shut down. If you choose to wear your mask like this during practice, you're not meeting the guideline. It needs to be up over your nose if you're working with our student athletes. So they have to understand the responsibility if they want to do this. And we have coaches and we have student athletes that I believe want activities. So we have to make sure that we're doing it safely. We will hold that meeting. We will continue to work with legal counsel to obtain a acknowledgement that our coaches have been through a meeting. They understand what the guidelines are. And then obviously we would have the student athlete waiver that the parent and athlete would sign. This would go for band as well. There would be one more, a little bit different, more specific to band. And that we have an Ohio High School pledge form about safety guidelines. But the governor's office, just so people know, this highlighted part up here talks about requirements for inter-team contact sport competitions. What that means is for our school to play another school, to have a scrimmage in grades 7 through 12, there are current orders that are in place until July 31st by the Ohio Department of Health. Ohio High School, starting August 1st, will have their guidelines. If the state extends this guideline for contact sports, it will not be possible for contact sports to have competition against another school. That includes a scrimmage, okay? So what has to happen as of right now through July 31st, a couple more days, if a team wanted to have a competition against another team, then you have to conduct a test, a COVID test, within 72 hours of the event. And you have to have those test results by the time the event starts. Well, they're not coming back that fast. All right? These guidelines were put in place for things like the TBT tournament, some softball tournaments in Columbus. But if they try to apply these requirements, it will be the end to contact sport competitions, to games. So just know that, again, if we have to administer a test to each athlete and team staff member participating in competition no more than 72 hours prior to the start of competition, and the results must be in hand prior to the start of the competition, of any athlete or staff member testing positive, and the entire team and staff are prohibited from participating in competition. and all participants must remain in isolation with the other teammates and team staff from the time of the COVID test is administered until the time of the competition. Well, if we have to do that 72 hours in advance and we have to isolate students, then they can't go to school unless we're all online. So the state has made this impossible to have these contact sport competitions. Contact sports would be football, soccer, cross country, and I believe field hockey is in there as well. We don't have field hockey. So these things have to change. The governor's office is working with the Ohio High School Athletic Association. The Ohio High School Athletic Association has a return to play for competition document that is strongly recommended. I believe what's going to happen is that the State Department of Health is going to allow Ohio High School to have contact sports like football, soccer, cross country, then those recommendations are going to become mandates and they have to be enforced. And I hope they don't include testing of athletes, because if they do, this county cannot test our kids 3 days beforehand. We cannot isolate them for 3 days with each other before a competition. So I want people to understand all the language and who you're dealing with and the impacts. It's not that we don't want to compete against other schools. We want to do it safely, but right now, Ohio High School, the school-on-school scrimmages in those sports, football, soccer, and cross country, are suspended. I could see Ohio High School possibly delaying the start of the season a couple weeks, or allowing intra-team scrimmaging and practicing, but you cannot have inter-team competitions until maybe the 21st or the 17th of August. I'm hearing some dates being talked about. So that would still allow us to get started on time with fall sports, but just know that it's fluid. We have a meeting coming up where our hands are tied if they extend this to school sports. But right now, volleyball, tennis, golf, those things have got the go-ahead. They can have scrimmages, competitions. They're non-contact sports. There's no testing requirement for those. So those can proceed as normal, okay? Let me see. Again, I talked about the importance. For some students, it may be the only thing that keeps them in school. It may be the only thing that keeps them coming back to an online learning environment or to a hybrid learning environment if they know that they can participate in football. Even if they're on their remote day, they're at home, we're on a hybrid schedule, they're on their remote day, they can still come to practice those days. They're not here instructionally. We've got a different group of kids here. But at the end of the day, they can come to practice. So we wouldn't have two groups of kids practicing at different times. You would still participate after school in that extracurricular activity. On buses with transportation, teams would be required to wear masks. On the sidelines, they're giving some graces with the amount of room that you have on sidelines. Hand sanitizer available. If you're out of the competition, on the bench, you're wearing a mask. You're 6 feet apart. You're washing hands, before and after competition. There's no handshakes. There's high fives or applauding the other team. Those types of things. So our goal for Bloom Carroll is August 3rd, but we're still waiting on Ohio High School and the Department of Health when it comes to contact sports. So I just want to make sure that people don't call us and say, why aren't you letting the football team play? It's not us. If we do it, we have to do it within their guidelines, and we have to do it as safely as possible. But there is inherently a risk involved in everything we do in life. So we want to make sure we communicate that they know what these risks are, that they could contract any virus, let alone COVID-19. But, with the waivers hold up when it comes to extracurricular activities. They don't in school because you're expected to provide FAPE, a free appropriate public education. So that's a requirement. There's compulsory attendance, and I guess that's the difference. But
that's still talking about competition. They can still have practice internally and scrimmage against each other and practice.
We're talking practice, aren't we?
Yeah.
We can.
I mean, it's still until the decision comes out.
Right.
You can still practice.
Yeah, starting by our district August 3rd, because we need to have coaches meeting. Every waiver has to be signed. Every coach has to be trained. Every coach needs to sign off on the acknowledgement that they know what their guidelines are for their sport and that we held a meeting with them. And every student would need to sign the pledge to try to follow these guidelines and that they understand what's expected. So that's all I really have for tonight. And don't know what the board has to say. I do need some feedback on athletics. If you disagree with me, that will obviously direct me into a different decision. We're not voting on athletics continuing, but it's, you know, it's kind of where we are right now, so.
I'm like you, I think the athletics need to, it's just important going to school for our kids. I mean, everybody,
Right.
at the end of the year, a lot of seniors lost a lot of chances. Hopefully they did it, but there's possibilities. So, I mean, I'm all for getting them in there safely like we're doing in school.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just as big as being in school for a lot of kids and their futures.
Yeah, I agree with Jimmy on this. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, there's so many things that go into this, and are we gonna have the perfect plan? Probably not. Is there a chance that the colors will change quite a bit? Yeah. But at the end of the day, I mean, I look at the well-being, the mental well-being, the emotional well-being, the interaction of the children, and there's times, you know, where honestly, take my word, I appreciate every one of you out here being bold and courageous, but I understand where you're coming from, but there's also times where you have to also be safe and responsible as well. I just think through all this, you know, we're gonna get through this. I mean, there's three things that make this community great: the students, the staff, and the parents and the community members of it. And I think if we can take baby steps, dip our toe into this and try to get kids back in the classroom and have activities, you know, band, everything, drama club, and do it in a safe and responsible manner, then I'm all for it.
No, I agree. I mean, I think that what you put out tonight is extremely organized. You considered all, opinions and risks. And it's gonna be fluid. It's like a traffic light. I think it looks like we're ready for what comes. But definitely support sports getting back in as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I'm the same, support sports, sports getting back to school. I appreciate all the teacher feedback, all the emails we've been getting from the residents, teachers. I mean, we do need some direction. Obviously, we do not have all the answers. We need some direction, and we thought we had it under control in the June meeting, and we were going great.
Yeah.
2 days before the July meeting, it changes. So it's probably gonna change again tomorrow after tonight's press conference.
Yeah.
But, so if there's anything you guys need from us, we're available, but, let's go, get through it. It's not gonna be easy.
You know, Rod brought up a good point that it's always, you know, it's always easy when you sit in the parent's chair. You know, I'm a parent, 3 kids. You guys are all parents, children in the school district. And that's one perspective. And that's very important. That's a very important perspective. But so is the student perspective. And the students want to be in school. And the parents want their children in school as much as possible. And, you know, we have had, like I said, if we made a decision for green, there's people unhappy. If we made a decision for yellow, there's people unhappy. If we made a decision for all red, there's a lot of people unhappy. I've heard everything, mask, no mask, you know, just, it's a lot of different opinions coming at you. And you have to do what you feel is right. And what I feel is right is for students, if possible, to stay in school as much as possible and to have activities. That includes your performing arts, that includes athletics. But our attorney has been real clear that for in-person instruction, we need insurance. We need a partner. We need another school district, in our county preferably. Okay, that's getting harder. I'm not sure what's going to happen in southeastern Franklin County, Canal Winchester. I'm not sure what's going to happen with Pickerington. I'm not going to announce their plans. I talked to these superintendents, but they have their own decisions to make in their own community. But Franklin County's in a different situation now. Pickerington has students in Franklin and in Fairfield counties. How are they going to handle that? At some point, you know, somebody might be different. You know, if Franklin County goes all online, is it going to go all online to Lake Erie and all the way down to the Ohio River? It will if Governor DeWine makes an announcement or an order, But at some point, you have to look at your community and the specifics and the cases and what's right for your community. And when you have the responsibility for the health and safety of just not your own child, but 2,100 students and 225 staff members and 4,000 parents, it's a huge responsibility in those decision-making processes. And this has been by far the most challenging thing I have ever seen, and I hopefully will ever see. But you gotta have a partner. There are other districts in our county that have already announced either green, one of them, or hybrid, which is yellow for a lot of them. There are some that have already announced online with sports, all online with sports. So there are multiple districts that are hybrid. And I think we have a partner, at least in the county. But we also have to have a staff willing to come to work. Do they want to be here? So that's the next thing. If we don't have staff here, which goes back to our mask and our time, then we can't have school if we don't have adults here that are licensed. So substitutes, a bunch of them aren't going to be available. We're not going to have the same number of substitutes that we've had. So it's going to be challenging. And then we have to have board approval, which you all made the decision on July 13th. The majority of the board, 3 votes for yellow, and we're hybrid. So for me, I want to hang on to that as safely and as long as we can and get our schools open, and preferably someday get them open on a normal schedule to students. And I don't know when that's going to be. So it's going to be a tough year, and I pray every day for a miracle, for a vaccine. Keep thinking in a month they're going to make an announcement and things might get better, but it's not going to happen in a month, honestly, you know?
Yeah.
So this is going to be tough, and our community is going to have to come together to support our kids. And parents have a lot more responsibility, unfortunately, in this. And it's hard because they have lives and work, and it's challenging for a lot of families. So I just appreciate, you know, how hard this has been on the board. You know, it's not supposed to be this complicated. And you've been bombarded, unfortunately, but every school board in the state, every superintendent I talk to is going through the same thing. And this is what we get when you want local control. A lot of people said in the spring, well, Columbus needs to shut down in Cleveland and Youngstown, but why is Benton County shut down? They don't have any cases. That's a good point. So we got local control, but here's the problem with local control. You see so many different opinions. And it's hard to balance all this, but it's a huge responsibility. I want our kids in school. I want to see our kids. I know what's best for them, but we have to follow safety procedures, and we have to have a staff that's available too and safe. So I think the changes we made tonight that I will communicate in the next couple days help get us closer, and I hope conditions across the state and across the area improve. That's be the last thing I say.
All right, Mr. Bratton, do you want to add anything? Just trying to keep your number good.
No, I'm here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I think the rest of the board absolutely support all activities starting, and just our, I think I, again, appreciate all the time and effort I know you put into this, and numerous conversations we've had as well, so thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other questions, concerns?
Public participation.
All right, great. We will now move to item F, public participation. If anybody else would like to sign up real quick. We usually don't get these many, or as many people at a board meeting. And trust me, we do take your input, and we do like to hear from you guys. Oh, right here.
Rod, we just review the procedure for that.
Yeah, I'll read it here, just ask me to read this. I think you liked your answer. All right. A citizen granted permission to address the board shall speak no longer than 3 minutes at one time, except by consent of the majority of the board members present. A maximum of 30 minutes of public participation may be permitted at each meeting. The Bloom Carroll Board of Education policy requires that individual names not be used as a part of a complaint or concern being stated to the board during the public participation part of the agenda. The board rests in its president the authority to terminate any remarks which may be defamatory, abusive, or otherwise cause undue interruption or interference with the orderly conduct of business. All right. We start at 7:50.
7:50.
All right, perfect. The first individual up is Mr. Harmon.
Good evening. My name is Cody Harmon, and I'm a senior student football player for Bloomfield Hills. I'm a proud football. This school, its teachers, and students have helped raise me and make me the man I am becoming. I have learned, laughed, and cried here. I have bled for this school. I have been given an opportunity here. Don't take the opportunity away from me. We as students deserve a chance at excellence. Academics, sports, scholarships, and social needs that only school classes can fully provide. Leave politics and media out and don't take that chance from me of excellence away. The U.S. population is 330 million. In 5 months, the number of deaths from COVID-19 was 130,000. The number of deaths as a percent of the population is 0.03939, compared to the number of cancer cases diagnosed in 2019, which was 607,000. COVID-19 is real, cancer is real. I can't run from cancer. Don't teach me to run from fear. Teach me to face my fears with confidence and determination. To make any changes and adjustments I need as the situation before me unfolds. Success is never realized by the man who cowers and fears from adversity. Don't take that success away from me. In the Bible, Timothy 4:13 states, "Until I come, give attention to the public reading of the Scripture, to exhortation and teaching." Please don't take the opportunity, a chance of excellence, success, and teaching away from me. Don't take it from us, and don't take it from me. We want and need our school and all that comes with it. We support you. Please support us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cody.
All right, Ms. Tolbert.
Hello, my name is Noelle Tolbert, and I'm a parent of a senior and your high school swim coach. For those 2 reasons, I'm not only invested in my child, but how her senior year will look. But in my athletes who are looking forward to not only coming back to school, but also having a swim season and representing Bloomfield in their sport. When we started on this journey in March, we were all fearful of the unknown. We agreed to shut down the shelter in place while we get the data, flatten the curve, and allow hospitals to ramp up for what is expected to be high numbers of hospitalizations. As we approach the first week of May, daily case numbers look good at just under 600 in a day in a state of 11 million people. Our goal had been accomplished, and there hadn't been 100,000 a day contracting COVID here in Ohio. In fact, we never had more than 2,169 cases in a day, and that was on April 16th, after all the prisons had just been tested. In Fairfield County, the most cases we have had in a day is 38, with a population of 157,000. Did you know the first documented case in Fairfield dates back to January 27th? So COVID was here well before March when we shut down. Mr. Hahn already talked about
Bashful.
Thank you for being willing to speak, though. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Mr. Seipel?
Well, first off, you guys did address most of my concerns. But just a quick thing, you know, I'm Aaron Seipel. I'm the sole parent of 3 proud Blue Girl students. And there should be 6th, 7th, and 11th grade this year. 2 student athletes. I got tennis and 7th grade football. And I got marching band. And I thank you very much for, you know, requiring masks. I think that's very important. You know, this is a public health issue. It's not political. You know, it's, my main concern is the community. You know, I really like the health department letter. One of the things that it stated was that this is our fault, that we didn't follow the guidelines, and that's why this stuff is spread. I live in 43110. I watch those numbers every day. We've tripled in our number of cases since the July 13th meeting. So it's only going to get worse. That's why I've got a really big concern about the extracurricular activities. You know, football, band, are top of my list for my own children. You know, yes, we don't kill a lot of kids with these things. These kids can kill their parents, you know? And I can tell you, you know, if you want to talk about mental health issues, I know firsthand what it's like for a kid to lose their parent. We've got to help, you know, keep this social distance and isolation going. We've got to get the community to behave. You know, I would appreciate if the school board, you know, as beacons in the community would help message that the sooner we start distancing and following the rules, the sooner we can get back to normal. I want my kids to school 5 days a week. You know, love them to death, but I don't really like them at home. And I really don't like having to be their tech support. So that's the first thing. The second thing I had is actually about school. You know, most of your academic classes make sense. You know, I can wear a mask in math class. What are we going to do for choir? What are we going to do for band? What are we going to do for gym or PE? Sorry.
Yeah.
What are we doing for those activities that are, you know, my daughter plays clarinet. She, being crude, jokes about it, calls it her piracy. You know, choir class. I've got a 6th grader who's required to do music. He's signed up for choir. So it's a bunch of kids shouting, you know, on the risers in the auditorium. What are we going to do to protect them from bringing that stuff home? You know, I know that my kids, you know, I'm a pretty healthy guy. Statistically speaking, I should not if I did this.
thank you for sticking to your plan. Thank you to those teachers. I am a wife of an educator, and I understand exactly what you guys are going through. I understand the 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock conference calls at night. I understand he says 2 hours on the weekends and it's 2 days on the weekends to get this stuff to work. I understand that he most likely will not get a raise. He may get a pay cut. You're Mr. High State University, they could get rid of them. So it really says enough for all you guys. Thank you. You guys are doing an excellent job. That's all.
Mr. Bender?
Thank you to the board and to Superintendent Vaughn. And thank you for your presentation today. I think that was well needed. It provided a lot of clarification, and it was very thorough and well done, very concise. I feel like the board is where I work for the fire department, and I was involved in a lot of our COVID planning back in March, and we continue to this day. It's just an ongoing and flexible process, and that's what we've learned to do. But you're kind of encountering the same questions that we had back in March, and I feel like, oh my gosh, I could like answer some of those concerns. But to your point, when you said at the beginning, you opened up with health statistics, I agree, the incidence of disease in the community is low. We've still seen that, even though we're spiking, it's still low. The risk in children is extremely small, and you can question about how much a child could actually be affected. In the fire department, we could not close down. That was not an option for us. We had to maintain operations. And in March, it was hair on fire when we had our first COVID case. We shut down fire stations. And then we had figured out, well, that's not going to work. We're going to lose our whole workforce. So we had to adapt. One thing I would say to the board in your planning is that you are going to get a positive case at some point. Just be prepared for that. It's not the end of the world. We don't shut down fire stations anymore. We continue with our operations. We do a thorough cleaning. We isolate who needs to be isolated, and we quarantine who needs to be quarantined, but we don't completely shut down. So just be prepared for that, because it will happen at some point. We will have a positive case that we'll have to deal with. That's one of my recommendations that I can offer from my experience. I also wanted to say that, in March, as we were dealing with a very busy schedule at the fire department, my wife was working. She is a speech pathologist. She'll actually be helping out the district here in the fall, covering maternity leave. She was dealing with her private practice and moving that online. It was chaotic, it was hectic, and we learned absolutely how essential all the educators are to our kids. It was very difficult to try to manage their teaching and while working and having two full-time, being a parent and being an educator wasn't working. So I commend the work that what happened in the spring and the planning that's going into this session as we move into the fall season here. And I also commend you for realizing that it is in the best interest to get kids back in school. And in our political climate right now, as we're seeing so easy to just follow the lead, and we're seeing big districts close and say we're going online, and for you to have the courage to say, no, it's important to get these kids back in school. It is important to get these kids back in school. And for you to have the courage to do that, I just send a giant compliment to you and the entire board for backing that and realizing that's what's best for our kids, and to do it safely, of course. I'm always happy to help if you have it, if you need something to run by, because we've seen a lot, obviously, dealing with people that are eating, sleeping, living together. We've learned a lot of lessons about this disease and how to handle different situations. So best of luck. I'm glad to hear the plan. I support the plan and look forward to a good opening to our 2020 school year. Thank you.
Broker.
Todd Ray, we've got 3 kids in the district, hopefully a 5th, 4th, and kindergartner. My question is actually towards what the structure may look like for them, and I don't expect an answer now. And I do appreciate your due diligence, your clarity, your flexibility with everything that's going on, because I know it's difficult. With my kindergartner, and knowing lots of different people from different districts and seeing how they're starting to structure their routine, it kind of concerns me about what will happen with Bloom Carroll. I know there's a lot of people use common sense here, so my worry is small, but it's still one of those things I'd like to know how the day-to-day is going to work. I know in my wife's district, she teaches for Canal, they are going to have kids in a very separate fashion. She teaches kindergarten, we're going to have a kindergartner. I don't think that's very feasible. And being so stringent and having them not do what 5-year-olds do. I was just wondering if at some point, if we can get clarity from the board on what your plan is as far as, you know, they're gonna have a scheduled bathroom break at 10:20 for this class, it's gonna be 10:30 for this class. How is that going to look for our students? How is that gonna look for our children in moving forward? Even for my 5th grader, my 4th grader, what kind of structure will they have in their classroom? Because we all know 6-foot distancing in most of our classrooms won't happen. They're just not big enough buildings. They're too old, modulars and so forth. So that's the one question. Like everybody else, I'd like to thank you for the effort you're putting forward. This is truly a unique time. And before I forget, my wife did text me. With the online learning, this is also the one that I have. We have 3 children with 3 different class schedules. Thankfully, I have one in 5th grade, so that'll be a little bit different timing than the other 2. We do have 2 devices we can use, but is there a plan for those teachers? I know they've been doing Zoom meetings and things like that. It worked out well in the end of the school year last year. Are they going to be offering those as recorded lessons as well? So that way, if I have children that have conflicting schedules that can't be online at the right time, is there a way that we'll be able to see those lessons other than a live event like with Zoom? And that's kind of where I was wondering, along with the structure, if at some point can we get something from you all on how those things will work, including the possibility of having recorded lessons that we can go back to a review in case the child misses something, we can help them at a later time of the day or week. Again, thank you for your time, thank you for your effort, appreciate everything you're doing.
Thank you. Anybody else like to come up and speak? It's great. Those questions that were raised, we will do our best within the next couple of days to get back. Mr. Hahn, we'll take and consolidate these notes, and we can discuss further with that. All right.
I did actually have one question I didn't say during my comments. In terms of if a student, did you say, just a question about, one concern that we have going forward is when we get into flu season, like obviously COVID and flu or the common cold are exactly the same symptoms, and our recommendation is obviously stay at home if you're sick, small cough, stuffy nose. I mean, that's going to be a one to look at and talk about. But in terms of like, if we're keeping kids home from school, how's that going to hit their attendance? Just something to think about. I don't need an answer now, but that there's going to be exceptions to the policy just as the threshold will be so much lower.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Thank you. All right.
I was just gonna say thank you so much for everyone coming tonight. It's awesome to have people here and people who are willing to be courageous and stand up and speak. And it's a special shout out to Cody for being the only student to stand up. I think that's really awesome. It's a lot of takes a lot of guts to make us proud. So thank you to everyone. But I thought that was really special.
All right. Great. I will make a motion to adjourn.
I will second.
Motion made by Mr. Rod Johnson, second by Mr. Abbott. Mr. Bigham?
Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes?
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Timeout is 8:14.